Her hands trembled before the glass door, where a name etched in gold shimmered beneath the penthouse lights. Eleanor Davis, the daughter of a cleaning lady, worn out from fighting the impossible, was about to say yes to something that could shatter her from the inside. Elias Thorne, a billionaire she had never met, had offered her one night in exchange for everything. What he didn't know was that this humble woman possessed a strength that no fortune could ever buy. The air was still in the silent corridor on the top floor. Elena held the envelope tight, as if it were the only solid thing left in the world. Outside, the city pulsed with life, indifferent to the choice she was about to make. She looked at the dark wooden door. There was something almost cruel in its pristine gleam, as if it said, "You don't belong here." She almost turned to leave. Almost. But then she thought of her mother's breathing, the tubes, the eyes that had lost their sparkle. She raised her hand, hesitated for a single second, and pressed the doorbell. There was no sound, just the soft click of the mechanism and the frantic beat of her own heart. The doorknob turned slowly from the other side. The door swung open, and Elena took the first step into what would change her life forever. Elena knew exactly how many quarters were in the pocket of her jeans. She knew because she had counted them 3 times before leaving for work. She also knew that if she let the gate slam too hard, the latch would stick, so she pushed it shut gently, even when she was exhausted. By 5 a.m., she was already at the industrial laundromat, sorting piles of stained sheets. Steam, soap, suffocating heat. The machine was more predictable than life. There, no one asked if she was getting enough sleep, or if she was okay. After her shift, she raced to the hospital. 2 bus transfers. Marta, her mother, was in a public hospital bed with too many tubes, cared for by nurses who were too tired. The illness, a type of neuromuscular degeneration, no longer allowed her to stand on her own. But her eyes. Her mother's eyes still searched for Elena as if to say, "You are my strength." On her way back, Elena would cook rice and an egg, stare at overdue bills, and iron clothes for neighbors whenever she could. She slept on the living room sofa to better hear her mother at night. It was one of those nights when the doctor called. He said there was a chance, an experimental treatment, only available at private clinics. The cost was surreal, more than $500,000. Elena laughed, not because she found it funny, but because it was an amount she couldn't gather in 10 lifetimes. She tried everything. She started an online fundraiser, sold the television, and asked for an advance at work. She went to banks, churches, and politicians. She received pitying glances and empty answers. A social worker said that maybe, with a long and drawn-out lawsuit, there might be a chance. But time was not a luxury they had. The next night, with no hope left, she found a white envelope slipped under her door. No return address, just a date, an address, and a card with a name in raised lettering. Elias Thorne. Inside, a single typed sentence. "One night. The treatment will be fully funded. No questions asked." Elena sat on the kitchen floor, the paper between her fingers, her heart caught between anguish and love. And it was there, with the gentle hiss of her mother's oxygen coming from the next room, that everything began to fall apart. Since she was a little girl, Elena carried a dream she never told anyone, to see her mother sitting on a park bench, eating a roasted corn, her hands free, watching the world pass by without rush or pain. It wasn't about wealth. It was about a pause. It was about peace. Marta Davis spent her life scrubbing the stairwells of buildings where she wasn't even allowed to use the elevator. She never complained. She raised her daughter alone, doing laundry for others and cleaning apartments. Even with her hands full of cracks and calluses, she would make soup and still sing, off-key, the old songs on the radio. Elena wanted to give that back. A life of dignity, a clean bed, decent food, care. But when the diagnosis arrived, the world turned to stone. The disease advanced like a thief, stealing a little more each day from the woman who had raised her with so much love. The treatment was like a ticket back to what they had lost, and it cost more than any amount of effort seemed able to reach. Elena went after it. She tried. She walked into a bank wearing her only pair of shoes without a hole, her hair pulled back with effort, and hope in her voice. "What's your income, Ms. Davis?" the manager asked, without taking his eyes off his computer. She lied. She said 3,000. It was 2,200, adding up all her side jobs. He sighed. "We can't approve that amount. Not with this profile." This profile. She left the bank without tears, her pride too dry to cry. On the street, the world seemed to continue as if nothing had happened. The sun beat down mercilessly on the pavement, and she didn't know where to go anymore. On the way home, she passed a convenience store with a lottery counter. She considered risking what little she had in her pocket. Then she remembered that money would pay for the bus to the hospital the next morning. She put the coins back. At home, Marta was sleeping, her chest rising and falling slowly. Elena sat by the bed and held her mother's hand. "Forgive me if I can't do it, okay?" she whispered. Her phone vibrated. Unknown message. "The offer stands. Tomorrow 9 p.m, Thorn Penthouse." Eleanor turned off the screen. She went to the sink, washed her face, looked at herself in the mirror. "It's just one night," she thought, "but one night can be everything when you know you have no other options." And she still believed she could fix everything. That night, Elena didn't sleep. She lay down beside her mother, as she had since the symptoms worsened, but her eyes wouldn't close. Every shadow on the wall seemed like an unanswered question. Every noise from the building, a reminder of a world that waits for no one. At 4 in the morning she got up. She sat on the edge of the bed and watched her mother's body, too thin, too fragile, breathing as if she was already slowly leaving. At the hospital, the doctor was direct. If the protocol isn't started by Monday, the chance of reversal drops drastically. Monday. 3 days. Elena left the room, not knowing how she was still standing. The corridor seemed longer, colder. The sound of the machines, louder. The doctor's words beat like a hammer inside her head. At the bus stop, the rain began without warning. She didn't have an umbrella or the courage to run. She just stood there, soaked, trembling inside and out. Around her, people sought shelter. She just existed, invisible. At home, she opened the email she had ignored for 2 days. The contract was there, objective, cold, a single page. No abusive clauses, as if that made a difference. One night, voluntary presence, full payment for Marta Davis's treatment. No mention of what would be expected, no guarantee beyond silence. Elena didn't know if it was relief or another form of disguised violence. She took a deep breath. She printed the paper and left it on the kitchen table. Then she went to do the laundry. She needed to occupy her hands. Her heart was another matter. In the afternoon, Marta had a small breathing crisis. She was stabilized quickly. Eleanor pretended to be calm. At night, she was hungry, but she didn't eat. She made a thin cup of tea. She drank in silence. Her phone vibrated again. Unknown number. "My driver will be available at 8:30 p.m. The building has a private entrance." She typed, "What if I back out?" Immediate reply, "You are free, but your mother needs you." She left the phone on the table, stared at the moldy kitchen walls, and felt a hot anger rise in her chest. Not at him, at the world, at destiny, at the exhaustion. At 7 p.m. She put on the navy blue dress she wore for interviews, the one that never brought her luck. She made a simple bun, put on some light lipstick. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror of the laundromat where she worked. "You're still you," she murmured. Before leaving, she went to her mother. She kissed her forehead. "This isn't the end, okay? I promise." When the car arrived, Elena got in without a word. The driver didn't say anything. It was as if everyone in that universe understood what this meant. Arriving at the penthouse, she felt the ground tremble beneath her feet, not because of the building, but because it was real. The elevator rose in silence. The world below shrank into a glittering map, and her life as she knew it peeled away floor by floor. When the door opened, the hallway was lit by warm lights. The dark wooden door was there, in front of her. She raised her hand, and before she could touch it, the door opened. Elias Thorne was there, tall, white shirt sleeves folded to the elbows. No tie, no expression. Elena stared into his eyes. She found no desire, no compassion, only something unreadable. "You came," he said, as if it was no surprise. She nodded, without a single word. She walked inside. The atmosphere was silent, almost outside of time. The world outside was a distant memory. Inside, everything smelled expensive and clean. Elena stopped in the middle of the room, unsure of what to do with her hands. He gestured toward the set table. "We can have dinner first," he said. She took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long time, she realized she was at the end of her rope. Have you ever had to do something that felt so wrong, but was the only way out? Something no one would understand, but you did it for love? If so, leave an "I get it" in the comments. Sometimes just knowing someone else has been through it can lighten the pain a little. The dinner was served with surgical perfection. Tall candles, expensive plates, crystal glasses. Elena sat at the table with her hands clasped in her lap, trying to ignore the knot in her stomach. It wasn't hunger, it was anything but that. Elias poured the wine with precise, almost mechanical movements. "I know this is strange," he said without looking up, "but I wanted us to start without rushing." She nodded, not knowing what he meant. The food was warm and fragrant, but Elena could barely swallow. Each mouthful felt like a test. The conversation was minimal. The silences were long. He didn't ask personal questions, didn't offer compliments, didn't smile. It was as if he was waiting for her to break. "Why me?" she asked, suddenly, before she could stop herself. Elias stopped cutting his steak. It took him a few seconds to reply. "Because you didn't beg," he said. He looked into her eyes. "Because you saw me, and you still didn't lower your head." Elena swallowed hard. It wasn't the answer she had expected. "So this is curiosity. A whim," she challenged, almost in a whisper. "It's respect," he said. "Distorted, maybe, but real." There was a silence. This time it felt less uncomfortable. Elena leaned back in her chair. Her hands were still cold, but her chest felt less tight. She couldn't explain it, but there was something about this man that didn't match what she had imagined. He didn't seem like a predator, nor a savior. He was just a lonely man, trying to maintain control in his own way. And for the first time that night, Elena didn't feel like an object. She felt like someone who could still choose. She stood up slowly, went to the massive glass window, and looked at the city below. Life went on, noisy and unaware. "I'm here because I'm out of options," she said without turning around, "but that doesn't mean I have no worth." She turned to him, her stance firm. "If I'm going to be used, then let it be with the truth. If I'm going to be seen, then look, I'm here, whole, for now." And there, even without understanding how, she began to rebuild herself. She didn't know if it would work, but for the first time, she wanted to try. Elena woke with the morning light streaming through the huge glass window. The bed was too soft, the sheets too white, the silence strange. She was alone. The dress she wore the night before was carefully folded on a chair. Beside it, a note. "The treatment has already been authorized. Marta will be transferred today. E.T." She sat up slowly. She expected to feel shame, disgust, guilt, but there was only a blank space. No immediate relief, no sense of victory, just quiet. Hours later, at the hospital, the receptionist confirmed everything with a surprised smile. "The admission has been moved to the private wing. Room 314. Everything is covered, Ms. Davis, including the experimental treatment." In the new room, her mother was sleeping with less difficulty. The oxygen hissed at a less aggressive pace. The sheets were clean. There were flowers, a television on low volume. Elena sat for hours beside the bed, watching every rise and fall of her mother's chest. She was still here, still breathing. There was still time. The next day, she went back to work at the laundromat. She needed to keep busy, but the world seemed different. The co-workers laughed at the same jokes, the machines made the same noises, but she felt she no longer belonged there. At the end of her shift, she went home, showered, and went to bed early. She tried to forget, but the emptiness was deafening. Memories of the night returned in flashes, the food, the silence, his words, the way he looked at her, not as someone broken, but as someone who resisted. She squeezed her eyes shut, turned on her side. She was alive. Her mother was alive. And that, for now, was what mattered. The following days passed in a blur. Marta began the treatment with renewed hope. The doctors were optimistic. Elena cared for her mother, brought her fruit, read aloud, and combed her grey hair with the same gentleness her mother used with her as a child. But at night, when everything was quiet, the thoughts returned. She wondered if she was still the same person, if she had crossed a line she couldn't go back from. Elias hadn't contacted her again until Tuesday. Her phone vibrated with a short message. "Dinner, no expectations. Just food. Elias." Elena stared at the screen for several minutes. She turned it off, reread it, turned it off again. She didn't understand what he wanted, or what she herself wanted. During her shower, she rehearsed replies she wouldn't send. During dinner with her mother, she avoided touching her phone, but when she got home, she couldn't resist. "Tomorrow, at 8 p.m., she wrote. Minutes later, he replied, "I'll meet you in the same place." The next day, she chose a simple blouse, nothing to draw attention, no makeup, no perfume. She didn't want to look like she was expecting anything. The restaurant was small and welcoming, no pretense, soft jazz in the background. An old waiter who seemed to have known Elias for years. He stood up when he saw her come in. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. "I almost didn't," she replied. "But you came." Elena sat down. "I just want to understand," she said. "Why now?" Elias didn't hesitate. "Because you really looked at me that night, and you didn't run," she sighed. "And now, what do you expect from me?" "Nothing," he said. "I just wanted to see you again, the way you are. No contract." Elena didn't reply. But she stayed, and in the silence that followed, for the first time, she didn't feel pressured or watched, just present. The third time they had dinner together, Elias didn't reserve the same restaurant. Elena realized it in the car. The driver went down less trafficked streets until he parked in front of a discreet house, away from downtown. "He's waiting inside," the driver said before opening the door. Elena hesitated for a moment but got out. The house was different from anything she had expected. The wood was old, well-maintained. The walls smelled of books and coffee. In the yard, an old apple tree provided shade for a hammock. Elias greeted her with a nod. A simple shirt, sleeves rolled up like the first time. No formality, no masks. "Is this where you live?" she asked. "When I want to remember, I'm still human," he replied. Eleanor stepped inside. Dinner was on the table. Soup, homemade bread, and tea. As if they were two strangers trying to pass as ordinary people. During the meal they barely spoke, but when dessert was served, a simple cornbread cake with guava paste, Elena put down her silverware, took a deep breath, and broke the silence. "I didn't come here to say thank you." He nodded. "Nor to pretend we're something we're not." "I don't expect that either," he said with sincerity. She looked at him, her gaze unwavering. "I sold a part of myself, Elias, and I don't regret it. But I'm also not going to be the memory you visit when you want to feel less alone." He tried to speak, but she cut him off. "You gave me a gift I can never repay, time with my mother, but that doesn't make me yours." And then Elena took something from her purse, folded, silent, the contract. "It's right here, signed, paid, fulfilled, closed." She placed it on the table gently, as one might close a chapter that still ached at the edges. Elias lowered his eyes. He was silent for a few seconds. "You're not like anyone I know," he finally said. "I'm just like a lot of people," she replied. "The difference is, You've never looked at us before." She stood up, grabbed her purse, stopped at the door. "I hope one day you find someone who says yes because they want to, not because they have to." And then she left. The night wind hit her face like a rebirth. The air was cold, but for the first time, she didn't feel afraid. She was not a victim, nor a broken survivor. She was someone who made a choice with everything it cost, and now, finally, she was free. 2 months later, room 314 in the hospital no longer smelled of medicine. The window stayed open in the afternoon, and Marta would ask to sit in the armchair beside it, just to feel the sun on her face. Elena helped her walk short distances down the hall. Sometimes her mother complained about the food, which was a good sign. Other times she would ask her to turn off the TV and just sit there, reading something aloud. Color had returned to Marta's face. Her eyes were more alive, still weak, still at risk, but alive. That morning, Eleanor held a comb and gently ran it through her mother's thin hair, as if smoothing out the past. Marta watched her own reflection in the mirror with a serenity that hadn't been there in a long time. "I don't know what you had to do, honey," she murmured. Elena stopped combing. Silence. "But I know it was for love." She didn't answer. She just held her mother's hand and stayed there, long enough that no words were necessary. Later, on the bus ride home, Eleanor looked at the city through the window. The streets were the same poorly painted buildings, the same rushing cars. But she was no longer the same. She still took on side jobs. She still ironed clothes for neighbors. But now there was something inside her that hadn't existed before. Space. A kind of silence that didn't hurt. A pause between the struggle and the guilt. She didn't tell anyone what had happened. Not out of shame, but out of respect for her own story. That night, lying on her thin bed, she thought, "I didn't conquer the world, but I conquered what was inside me." And that was more than she had ever imagined achieving. Elena never forgot the night she pressed the doorbell of that penthouse. Not because of the details, but because of what it represented. A point of no return. For a long time, she believed that dignity was something you lost all at once. One false step, and that was it. You were stained, marked, undone. But now she knew. Dignity isn't about never falling. It's about how you get up afterward. She didn't feel like a hero. She didn't see herself as a victim either. She was just a woman who had to make choices she never wanted, to protect someone she loved more than herself. And even if no one else knew, she knew. She knew about the silence she carried, the fear she faced, the courage she invented in the dark. Today, she doesn't measure her worth by what's in her pocket, but by what she still feels in her heart. And little by little, she began to believe that, maybe, there was still something beautiful in store for her after all of this. Now you tell me, maybe you've never faced a choice as difficult as Elena's, but have you ever had to swallow your tears to protect someone? Have you ever felt that no one would ever know how much you sacrificed in silence? If so, this story is also yours. And maybe someone right now needs to read yours. If this story touched you in any way, if at any point you felt represented by Elena's quiet courage, leave a like. It's the simplest way to show that stories like this still matter. And let me know in the comments which city you're watching from. I read every message and make a point of replying to those who take a moment to share. If you believe in the power of real human stories, subscribe to the channel. Every new subscription is what gives me the strength to keep telling the stories the world usually ignores. And don't go yet. Choose one of the 2 stories I've left on the screen for you to watch next. I'll see you in the next video.